David sat in his small apartment, the glow of his computer screen reflecting off his tired eyes. Another long day of coding was finally over. He stretched his arms above his head and looked around his quiet living room. The same routine every single day. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. At 28, he sometimes wondered if this was all there was to life. The rain tapped softly against his window as he heated up leftover pizza in the microwave. Seattle weather was always the same. Gray, skies and endless drizzle. He had gotten used to it after living here for 5 years, but tonight felt different somehow. There was something in the air that made him feel restless. Just as he was about to settle down with his dinner, 3 soft knocks echoed from his front door. David paused, fork halfway to his mouth. Who could be visiting at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night? He wasn't expecting anyone. His few friends usually called first, and the delivery apps always sent notifications. The knocking came again, more gentle this time, almost musical in its rhythm. David put down his plate and walked slowly to the door. Through the peephole, he saw someone standing in the hallway, but the lighting was dim and he couldn't make out much detail. The person seemed small, maybe a woman, wearing something that caught the light in an unusual way. "Who is it?" he called out, keeping the chain lock in place. "Hello, my name is Kira. I'm here about your matching results." The voice was sweet and clear, with a slight accent he couldn't place. It sounded almost musical, like wind chimes in E, a gentle breeze. David frowned. "Matching results? I think you have the wrong apartment. I didn't sign up for any dating service." There was a pause, then a small laugh that somehow made him smile despite his confusion. "Oh, this isn't a dating service. It's much more official than that. Could you please open the door? I have important documents to show you." Something about her voice made him curious. Against his better judgment, David turned the locks and opened the door, keeping the security chain attached, so only a small gap appeared. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. The woman standing in his hallway was unlike anyone he had ever seen. She was petite, probably just over 5 feet tall, with the most unusual and beautiful features. Her skin had a soft, pearl-like quality that seemed to glow faintly in the dim hallway light. Her hair was silver white, flowing like liquid mercury down her shoulders. But it was her eyes that truly stunned him. Large, bright violet, and filled with warmth and intelligence. She wore what looked like a form-fitting suit made of material that shifted colors as she moved, like oil on water. In her delicate hands, she held a small device that looked like it was made of crystal and light. "You're David Chen, correct? Born March 15, 1996. Software engineer at TechFlow Solutions?" she asked with a bright smile that revealed perfect white teeth. David's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. How do you know all that?" "The Compatibility Bureau has very thorough records." She held up the crystal device, which began glowing softly. "According to our analysis, we are a 97% match across all compatibility factors. Congratulations, you've been matched with a life partner." She paused, her smile growing even wider. "And that's me." For a moment, David thought he might be dreaming, or having some kind of breakdown from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. "I'm sorry, what? A life partner? I never signed up for anything like that." Kira tilted her head, looking genuinely confused. "Oh, but you did. Well, not directly. Your planet's government submitted applications for all eligible citizens when Earth joined the galactic community 6 months ago. It's all perfectly legal and beneficial for both our species." "Galactic community?" David felt dizzy. "Look, I don't know what kind of joke this is, but..." Before he could finish, Kira noticed a small cut on his hand from where he'd scraped it on his desk earlier. Without asking, she reached through the gap in the door and gently touched the wound. David felt a warm, tingling sensation, and when she pulled her hand away, the cut was completely gone. Not even a mark remained. David stared at his hand, then at Kira, then back at his hand. That's not possible. Oh, that's just basic cellular repair. Very simple technology. Kira said this as casually as someone might mention the weather. Would you like to see something more impressive? Before David could answer, she pointed at his keys hanging on the hook by the door. They began to float gently in the air, spinning slowly like they were underwater. David watched in stunned silence as they danced through the air before settling back onto their hook. "This isn't real," he whispered. "This can't be real." "I understand this is overwhelming," Kira said gently. "Culture shock is very common in first contact situations. That's why the Bureau gives couples time to adjust before making any permanent decisions." David slumped against the door frame. You're an alien from outer space." "Well, technically you're the alien from my perspective," Kira said with another musical laugh. "But yes, I'm from the Andromeda sector. My species is called the Kyathi. We've been part of the galactic community for over 3,000 years. And you're supposed to be my wife?" "Life partner," she corrected. "The concept of marriage varies greatly between species, so we use more general terms. But essentially, yes. The Bureau matched us based on psychological compatibility, shared interests, genetic factors that would benefit both our species, and approximately 400 other criteria." David ran his hands through his hair, trying to process what he was hearing. "This is insane. You can't just show up and tell someone they have an alien wife. That's not how things work." "Actually, it's exactly how things work in the galactic community," Kira said patiently. "Though I suppose your planet's government should have prepared you better. They were supposed to send out information packets." "Information packets?" "Yes, explaining the integration process, the benefits of interspecies partnerships, and the legal framework. Very important documents." She frowned. "You didn't receive them?" "I got nothing. No letters, no emails, no phone calls about alien wives or galactic communities or anything else?" David shook his head. "Look, Kira, right? This is all very interesting, but I think there's been some kind of mistake." "Oh no, there's no mistake." She held up the crystal device again, and David saw what looked like his photo and information displayed in floating three-dimensional text. David Chen, age 28, enjoys reading science fiction, builds model rockets as a hobby, prefers quiet evenings to large social gatherings, has a strong sense of justice, and shows high compatibility with Kyathi emotional patterns. "You're exactly who I'm looking for." David stared at the floating display. Everything she said was true, down to embarrassing details about his personality that he'd never told anyone. "How do you know all this?" "The Bureau has access to public records, social media profiles, purchasing patterns, and psychological assessments from your workplace wellness programs. It's all perfectly legal under the galactic community's privacy agreements." "Privacy agreements?" "That I never signed. Your government signed them on behalf of all citizens, standard procedure for new member planets." Kira's expression softened. "David, I know this is a lot to take in. I've been preparing for this meeting for months, but for you, it's completely unexpected. Would it help if I explain more about why this program exists?" David looked at this beautiful, impossible woman standing in his hallway, claiming to be his alien wife, and realized he had two choices. He could close the door, call the police, and try to pretend this never happened. Or he could listen to the most incredible story he was ever likely to hear. "You know what? Come in," he said, removing the security chain. "But I'm keeping the door unlocked, and if you try anything weirder than healing your wounds and floating your keys..." Kira stepped into his apartment with graceful movements that seemed almost like dancing. "Good point." David closed the door behind her and gestured toward his small living room. "Can I Can I get you something to drink? I don't know what aliens eat or drink, but I have water, coffee, some leftover pizza. Water would be wonderful, thank you. And we're not that different. Most carbon-based life forms have similar basic needs. Kira settled onto his couch, looking around the apartment with curious eyes. You have a lovely home. Very cozy. David brought her a glass of water and sat in his armchair, maintaining some distance while he tried to wrap his head around the situation. So, explain to me how this works, this matching system. The Intergalactic Compatibility Bureau was created to promote understanding and cooperation between different species, Kira began, her violet eyes bright with enthusiasm. When species become isolated, they often develop problems, genetic weakness, cultural stagnation, even aggression toward outsiders. But when different peoples come together, they create something stronger and more beautiful than either could achieve alone. And that requires marriage? Not marriage exactly. Partnership, friendship, love, if it develops naturally. Kira smiled. The Bureau doesn't force anyone to fall in love. We simply bring together people who have the potential for deep compatibility. What happens after that is up to them. David leaned back in his chair, studying this remarkable woman who had just turned his entire world. David woke up to the smell of something burning. He jumped out of bed, his heart racing as he rushed to the kitchen. What he found there made him stop dead in his tracks. Kira stood over his stove, wearing one of his old t-shirts that hung down, to her knees like a dress. She was stirring something in a pan that was definitely not supposed to be purple and definitely should not be producing that much smoke. Her silver hair was tied back in a messy bun, and she had a look of intense concentration on her face. "Good morning, David," she said cheerfully, not seeming to notice the small fire that had started on one of the burners. "I thought I would prepare you a traditional Earth breakfast." "Kira, the stove is on fire," David said, grabbing the fire extinguisher from under the sink. "Oh, that's supposed to happen," she replied confidently. "The cooking videos said to use high heat." After putting out the small fire and opening all the windows to clear the smoke, David sat down at his kitchen table and looked at the plate Kira had proudly set in front of him. Whatever it was, it looked like purple scrambled. Eggs mixed with what might have been toast if toast could turn blue and wiggle slightly. "What exactly is this?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Eggs and bread, just like in your Earth cooking shows," Kira said, sitting across from him with her own plate. She took a bite and immediately made a face that looked like she had tasted something terrible. This doesn't taste like it did in the videos." David poked at the purple mass with his fork. "Kira, what did you add to the eggs?" "Just some flavor enhancers from my travel supplies. They make everything taste better on my home world." She took another bite and winced. "But perhaps our taste systems are more different than I thought." David couldn't help but laugh. The whole situation was so ridiculous that he felt his nervousness, from the night before, starting to fade away. "How about I teach you how to cook human food and you can teach me about alien food?" Kira's face lit up. "That sounds wonderful. Cooking together is an excellent bonding activity." Over the next hour, David taught Kira how to make actual scrambled eggs and toast. She was a quick learner, though she kept trying to use her alien technology to speed up the process. Every time she pointed at the pan to make it heat faster or tried to use some kind of molecular manipulation on the eggs, David would gently redirect her hands. "Part of cooking is taking your time," he explained as she successfully flipped a piece of toast without making it change colors. "It's not just about the food, it's about the process." "Your species finds value in inefficiency?" Kira asked, genuinely curious. "We find value in experience," David said, realizing he'd never really thought about it that way before. "The smell of the food cooking, the sounds, the way it brings people together. If you just instantly create perfect Food, you miss all of that. Kira nodded thoughtfully as she carefully stirred the eggs. On my world, we solved the problem of hunger centuries ago. Everyone has access to perfect nutrition whenever they need it. But I think we may have lost something important in the process. After breakfast, David called in sick to work. He couldn't exactly explain that he needed to help his new alien partner adjust to human life. Instead, he spent the morning showing Kira around his apartment and explaining how different things worked. She was fascinated by everything. The way water came out of the faucet amazed her. You just turn a handle and clean water appears? How wonderfully simple. His television made her laugh with delight. The people inside are so tiny and dramatic. Even his houseplants captured her attention for nearly an hour as she examined their cellular structure with some kind of handheld scanner. Your species keeps other living beings in your homes just for beauty? She asked, gently touching the leaves of his spider plant. Some people do. I like having something green and alive around, David admitted. It makes the place feel less empty. Kira looked at him with those large violet eyes. You live alone by choice? Not exactly by choice, it just happened that way. David felt a familiar pang of loneliness. Most people my age are paired off or too busy with their careers to spend much time together. I guess I got used to being by myself. That sounds very lonely, Kira said softly. Sometimes, David admitted. What about you? Do your people live alone? Never, Kira said, sounding surprised by the question. We live in family groups of 12 to 15 individuals. I've never been alone for more than a few hours in my entire life. She paused. Until I came here. The journey from my world took several weeks of solitary travel. It was difficult. David felt a surge of admiration for her. You gave up everything familiar to come here. That must have been scary. Terrifying, she agreed, but also exciting. I've spent my whole life wondering what existed beyond our world. Now I'm finding out. Around noon, David's neighbor Tom knocked on the door. Tom was a retired teacher who lived across the hall and had a habit of checking on David when he heard unusual noises. Everything all right in there, son? Tom called through the door. Heard some commotion earlier. Smelled like something was burning. David looked at Kira, who had frozen like a deer in headlights. They hadn't discussed how to handle other people yet. Just a cooking accident, Tom. Everything's fine, David called back. You sure? I could lend you my fire extinguisher if you need it. Already got it handled, thanks. There was a pause. Then Tom's voice again, sounding curious. Thought I heard voices in there. You got company? David looked at Kira again. She pointed to herself and mouthed, "Invisible," while making a gesture that probably would have made her disappear from sight. David quickly shook his head and mouthed no back to her. Just watching TV, Tom. Thanks for checking. All right then. Let me know if you need anything. After Tom's footsteps faded away, Kira looked worried. I didn't think about other humans. Will your neighbors be suspicious if they see me? Probably, David admitted. You don't exactly blend in. That hair, your eyes, the way you move. People are going to notice. I could alter my appearance, Kira offered. Make myself look more typically human. Can you do that? Of course. Basic biological modification is simple. Kira's hair began to darken from silver to brown, and her eyes shifted from violet to a more human blue. Wait, stop, David said quickly. The change felt wrong somehow, like she was hiding her true self. Don't change yourself for other people. We'll figure something else out. Kira's features returned to their natural state. You don't want me to look more human? I want you to look like you, David said, surprised by how strongly he felt about it. If people have a problem with how you look, that's their problem, not yours. The afternoon brought new challenges. Kira tried to help by cleaning the apartment using what she called molecular reorganization. This resulted in David's books being sorted by the atomic weight of their paper instead of alphabetically, his clothes being arranged by thread count rather than type, and his kitchen utensils being organized in a way that made sense to alien logic but was completely useless to human cooking. "I'm trying to be helpful," Kira said, looking frustrated as David tried to find his coffee mug among perfectly organized items that were sorted by density. "I know you are," David said gently, "but maybe we should talk about things before rearranging them. What makes sense to you might not make sense to me. Your species is much more particular about your environment than I expected," Kira observed. "Or maybe your species is just better at adapting," David suggested. "I've never had to adjust to someone else living in my space before." That evening, David's best friend Ryan called. They had plans to meet for their weekly dinner and game night, something they'd been doing since college. "I can't make it tonight," David said, glancing at Kira, who was examining his gaming console with intense interest. "What? You never miss game night. Are you sick? You sounded weird when you called in this morning." "I'm not sick. I just have company." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Company? Like a woman?" "It's complicated, Ryan." "Dude, you've been single for 2 years. This is great news. Bring her along. I'd love to meet her." "That's not a good idea." "Why not? Is she married or something?" David looked at Kira, who was now holding his gaming controller, and somehow making the TV display patterns that definitely weren't part of any game he owned. "She's different," David said finally. "Different how? Wait, is she the one who was cooking this morning? Tom mentioned he smelled something burning and heard unfamiliar voices. Tom needs to mind his own business. David, what's going on? You're acting really strange." Before David could answer, Kira accidentally activated something on the gaming console that made all the lights in the apartment flicker in a rhythmic pattern. She looked at him apologetically and quickly set the controller down. "I have to go, Ryan. I'll call you tomorrow." "David, wait." David hung up and looked at Kira, who was clearly trying not to laugh. "I think I broke your entertainment system," she said. "It's fine. Probably." David sat down next to her on the couch. "Kira, we need to talk about how to handle other people. My friends and neighbors are going to get curious if I keep acting strange." "Do you want to tell them about me?" she asked. 3 weeks had passed since Kira arrived, and David's life had become something he never could have imagined. Every morning brought new surprises, new discoveries, and moments that made him question everything he thought he knew about the universe. He was learning that living with someone from another world was like constantly being in the most interesting science class ever. Kira would casually mention things like how her people could communicate with plants, or how they had solved the problem of aging centuries ago, or how music on her world was created by manipulating light patterns instead of sound waves. "Your species creates art with vibrations in the air," she had said one morning while listening to his playlist. "It's so beautifully primitive. The emotions it creates are much stronger than our light symphonies." David was making coffee, something that had become their morning ritual. Kira loved watching the process and had become surprisingly good at predicting exactly how he liked it prepared. "Primitive?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "I don't mean that in a negative way," Kira said quickly, her cheeks taking on that deeper pearl color they got when she was embarrassed. "I mean it's more raw, direct. It hits something deep inside that our refined arts can't reach anymore." David handed her a cup of tea. She couldn't drink coffee. Apparently caffeine had strange effects on her species, but she had developed a love for chamomile tea with honey. "Maybe that's what happens when you solve all your problems," David suggested. "You lose some of the messiness that makes life interesting." "Exactly." Kira's eyes lit up. "That's why so many of us wanted to join the partnership program. We wanted to remember what it felt like to be surprised by life." Today was the day David had finally worked up the courage to introduce Kira to Ryan. After 3 weeks of making excuses and dodging questions, his best friend was starting to get suspicious. Ryan had even shown up at David's apartment the night before, demanding to know what was going on. David had managed to convince him to leave by promising they would all have dinner tonight. The plan was simple. Meet at the botanical garden first, somewhere public but not too crowded, then go to Ryan's favorite restaurant. David figured if Ryan was going to have a breakdown about meeting an alien, it was better to happen outdoors, where they wouldn't get kicked out of anywhere. "Are you nervous about your friend meeting me?" Kira asked, noticing how David kept checking his watch. "A little," David admitted. "Ryan's a good guy, but this is going to be a lot for him to process." "What? If he doesn't accept me?" David looked at her, sitting cross-legged on his couch in one of the dresses they had bought her during their shopping trip earlier that week. Even trying to dress like a human, there was something unmistakably otherworldly about her. The way she moved, the way she held her head, the way her eyes seemed to see everything at once. "Then that's his problem, not ours," David said, surprising himself with how protective he felt. They met Ryan at the entrance to the botanical garden. David spotted his friend first, tall, dark-haired, wearing his usual jeans and sneakers, looking around with the impatient expression he got when he was curious about something. "Ryan!" David called out, walking over with Kira beside him. Ryan turned, and David watched his face go through a series of expressions as he took in Kira's appearance. Confusion, surprise, then something that might have been awe. "Ryan, this is Kira," David said, his heart beating fast. "Kira, this is my best friend Ryan." "It's wonderful to meet you, Ryan," Kira said, extending her hand with that graceful gesture that was somehow both formal and warm. "David has told me so much about you." Ryan shook her hand, and David saw his eyes widen slightly. Kira's skin was always a few degrees warmer than human normal, and her handshake was probably unlike anything Ryan had ever experienced. "Nice to meet you, too," Ryan said slowly, his eyes taking in her unusual coloring and those unmistakably violet eyes. "You're not from around here, are you?" David and Kira exchanged glances. They had practiced this conversation, but actually having it was much more nerve-wracking than they had expected. "That's actually what we wanted to talk to you about," David said. "Maybe we should walk while we talk." As they strolled through the garden, David began explaining everything. He started with the night Kira appeared at his door, moved through the story of the galactic community and the matching program, and ended with their decision to trust Ryan with the truth. Ryan listened without interrupting, though his expression grew more incredulous with each detail. When David finished, they were standing beside a pond filled with water lilies, and Ryan was staring at Kira like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "So you're telling me," Ryan said slowly, "that she's an alien from outer space, and you two are married?" "Life partners," Kira corrected gently. "And we're still in the adjustment period." "Adjustment period," Ryan repeated. "To see if we're truly compatible," Kira explained. "The Bureau doesn't force anyone into permanent partnerships. We have time to decide if this is right for both of ye." "Us." Ryan looked back and forth between them. "This is insane! This is completely insane!" David felt his heart sink. "Ryan, I know it's hard to believe." "Hard to believe?" "David, this is impossible. Except—" Ryan stopped walking and really looked at Kira again. "Except that it explains everything. The way you look, the way you move, those eyes. And David's been acting completely different for the past 3 weeks." "Different? How?" David asked. "Happier," Ryan said bluntly. "More relaxed, like someone who's finally found something he didn't even know he was looking for." Kira smiled, and David felt warmth spread through his chest. "Can you prove it?" Ryan asked suddenly. "That you're really from another planet?" Kira looked around the garden, then pointed to a small tree that was clearly struggling, its leaves brown at the edges. "May I?" She walked over to the tree and placed her hands gently on its trunk. David and Ryan watched as the brown leaves slowly turned green again and new buds began appearing on previously bare branches. Within minutes, the tree looked healthier than any of the other plants around it. "Holy," Ryan breathed, staring at the transformed tree. "Cellular regeneration," Kira explained casually. "Very basic biological manipulation. All Kiathi children learn it." "Kiathi? My species?" Ryan sat down heavily on a nearby bench. "I need a minute to process this." They sat in comfortable silence while Ryan stared at the tree Kira had healed. Finally, he looked up at them. "Okay, I believe you. Which means I have about 1,000,000 questions." What followed was the most fascinating conversation David had ever been part of. Ryan peppered Kira with questions about her world, her people, space travel, and life in the galaxy. Kira answered everything with patience and obvious enjoyment. "Your species still experiences conflict?" she asked, when Ryan mentioned the latest political arguments in the news. "All the time," Ryan said. "Wars, arguments, disagreements about everything. How do you solve them?" "Mostly we don't," Ryan admitted. "We just argue until we get tired or something more important comes along." Kira looked genuinely puzzled. "But conflict is so inefficient. Why not simply analyze the problem logically and implement the optimal solution?" "Because people aren't logical," David said. "We're emotional, stubborn, and we all think we're right about everything." "That sounds exhausting," Kira said. "It is," Ryan agreed. "But it's also kind of exciting. There's always something happening, always something to fight about or fight for." "On my world, we solved most sources of conflict long ago," Kira said thoughtfully. "Everyone has what they need. Everyone has a role that suits them. Everyone is content. But contentment and happiness aren't the same thing, are they?" "Not even close," Ryan said. As the afternoon wore on, David watched his best friend and his alien partner getting to know each other. Ryan's initial shock had given way to genuine curiosity and acceptance. More than that, David could see that Ryan actually liked Kira. "So what's it like?" Ryan asked David during a moment when Kira was examining some exotic flowers. "Living with someone from another planet?" "Complicated," David said honestly. "Amazing, but complicated. Every day I learn something new about the universe. Every day. She does something that reminds me how different we are. But also, every day I understand her a little better. And she understands me. It's like we're both becoming more ourselves by being together." Ryan nodded slowly. "You're falling for her." It wasn't a question. David realized his friend could see what he'd been trying not to admit to himself. "Yeah," David said quietly. "I think I am." "Does she feel the same way?" David looked over at Kira, who was now surrounded by butterflies that seemed unusually drawn to her presence. She was laughing with pure delight as they landed on her hands and hair. "I don't know," David admitted. "Her people experience emotions differently than we do. What feels like love to me might just be friendship to her." "Only one way to find out," Ryan said. That evening, they went to dinner at a small restaurant. Ryan had chosen specifically because it was quiet and private. Kira was fascinated by everything: the menu, the other diners, the way food was prepared and served. "On my world, nutrition is provided by biosynthesizers," she explained to Ryan. "Perfectly balanced, perfectly efficient. But this," she gestured to her plate of pasta, "this is like edible art." "You've never eaten food that was grown in soil before?" Ryan asked. David woke up the next morning with a heavy feeling in his chest. 1 week. 7 days to make the biggest decision of his life. He looked over at the couch where Kira was still sleeping, her silver hair spread across the pillow like liquid moonlight. Even in sleep, she looked otherworldly, beautiful in a way that made his heart ache. Over the past month, She had become so much more than just his alien partner. She was the first person he talked to every morning and the last person he saw, before going to sleep. She made him laugh with her curious observations about human behavior. She made him think about life in ways he never had before. And somewhere along the way, without him fully realizing it, she had become home to him. But what did he mean to her? Kira stirred and opened her violet eyes, immediately focusing on him with that intense attention she gave everything. "You're worried," she said, sitting up. "I can sense your emotional state. It's very turbulent this morning." "You can sense my emotions?" "All Kayathi can read emotional energy from other beings. It's how we communicate so well with different species." Kira tilted her head, studying him. "You've been broadcasting anxiety for the past hour. What's troubling you?" David sat on the edge of his bed, suddenly feeling shy about having this conversation. "The decision we have to make, about whether to stay together or not." "Oh." Kira's expression became carefully neutral. "Have you been thinking about what you want to decide?" "Have you?" They looked at each other across the small apartment, and David felt like they were standing on opposite sides of a huge canyon, trying to communicate across an impossible distance. "Perhaps we should discuss this properly," Kira said, getting up and smoothing down the oversized shirt she wore to sleep. "Would you like to make coffee while I prepare tea?" Their morning routine felt different today, charged with unspoken questions and concerns. David found himself watching Kira as she moved around the kitchen, memorizing the way she hummed softly while heating water, the way she always smelled the tea leaves before adding them to her cup, the way she smiled when she caught him looking at her. "David," she said softly, settling beside him at the small table, "I need to tell you something important about my situation." His stomach dropped. "What kind of something?" "When I volunteered for the partnership program, I didn't tell you the complete truth about why I chose to participate." David set down his coffee cup, giving her his full attention. "My family is prominent on my world. My father serves on the Galactic Council, and my mother is a respected scientist. They were strongly opposed to my joining the program." "Why?" "They believe that mixing with younger species is beneath us, that we should maintain our genetic and cultural purity." Kira's hands wrapped around her teacup, and David noticed they were trembling slightly. "When I announced my intention to join, they warned me that if I went through with it, I would no longer be welcome in their family." "Kira, that's horrible. It gets worse." She took a shaky breath. "Yesterday, when I received the message from the Bureau, there was also a communication from my family. They've officially disowned me. My name has been removed from all family records. If I return to my world, I'll have no home, no position, no support system." David felt anger rising in his chest. "They cut you off completely? Just for wanting to learn about other species? Just for choosing to be here with you?" Kira's voice was quiet but steady. "So you see, my decision isn't really a choice anymore. I can't go back even if I wanted to." "Is that what you want? To go back?" Kira looked at him with those incredible eyes, and David saw something in them he'd never noticed before. Vulnerability, fear, and something else that made his heart race. "No," she said simply. "I don't want to go back. But I also don't want you to feel obligated to choose me just because I have nowhere else to go." David reached across the table and took her hands. They were warm and soft, and they fit perfectly in his. "Kira, is that what you think? That I'd only stay with you out of pity?" "I think you're a kind man who wouldn't abandon someone in need," she said. "But that's not the same as choosing to build a life with someone because you want to." David stood up, still holding her hands, and pulled her to her feet. "Come here." He led her to the window that looked out over the city. The morning sun was streaming through the glass, casting everything in golden light. Do you see that coffee shop down there? He asked, pointing to the small cafe on the corner. Yes. I used to go there every morning before you arrived. Same order, same table, same routine. I'd sit there for exactly 20 minutes, drink my coffee, and head to work. Every single day. That sounds very efficient. It was also incredibly lonely. David turned to face her. I haven't been to that coffee shop once since you've been here. Do you know why? Kira shook her head. Because I'd rather spend those 20 minutes watching you discover something new about the world. I'd rather hear you laugh at something on TV that you don't quite understand. I'd rather listen to you explain how your people solved problems that we're still struggling with. David, I'm not finished. He took her face gently in his hands. You asked me once why humans keep plants in their homes. I said it was because they make the place feel less empty. But that's not the whole truth. What's the whole truth? We keep them because they're alive, because they grow and change and surprise us, because taking care of something beautiful makes us feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves. David's voice grew softer. You do that for me, Kira. You make everything feel more alive. Tears gathered in Kira's violet eyes. On my world, we have a concept called soul shine. It's when two beings create something together that's more beautiful than either could create alone. That sounds nice. I thought it was just a pretty idea until I met you. She reached up and touched his face. You make me want to be more than I was. More curious, more brave, more human. You don't need to be more human. You're perfect exactly as you are. Am I? Even though I'm from another world? Even though being with me means your life will never be normal again? David laughed, and it was full of joy and certainty. Kira, normal was killing me slowly. I was disappearing into routine and predictability. You saved me from that. So you want to stay together? Even knowing that it means choosing a life completely different from anything you planned? Especially knowing that. David leaned his forehead against hers. I love you, Kira. Not because you need me. Not because I feel sorry for you. But because you've become the best part of my life. You love me? Her voice was barely a whisper. Completely, hopelessly. I think I started falling for you the moment you healed that cut on my hand, but I was too scared to admit it. I love you too, she said, and her smile was brighter than the morning sun. I've loved you since you chose to let me stay that first night, even though everything about me was strange and impossible. They kissed then, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was David's first kiss with someone from another world, and somehow it felt like the most natural thing in the universe. When they broke apart, Kira was practically glowing with happiness. So we're really doing this? She asked. Building a life together? We're really doing this, David confirmed. Though I have to warn you, I have no idea what we're doing. Neither do I, Kira admitted, but I think that's part of what makes it exciting. They spent the rest of the morning making plans. David would contact the Bureau and confirm their decision to make the partnership permanent. They would look for a bigger apartment, something that could accommodate both human and Kyathi needs. Kira would apply for official residency status on Earth. What about your family? David asked gently. I have a new family now, Kira said, squeezing his hand. You and Ryan and whoever else we gather along the way. You know this means you're stuck with human holidays, human food, human weather, and human love songs, and human movies, and human ways of seeing the world, Kira added. I can't wait. That afternoon, Ryan came over to help them celebrate their decision. He brought a bottle of champagne and a grin that stretched from ear to ear. I have to admit, he said, raising his glass in a toast, when I imagined my best friend settling down, I never pictured it quite like this. Are you okay with it? David asked. Having an alien in the friend group? Are you kidding? This is the coolest thing that's ever happened to anyone I know. Ryan turned to Kira. Plus, she's way too good for you. I know, David agreed, looking at Kira with wonder. I have no idea what she sees in me. I see someone brave enough to choose love over fear, Kira said simply. Someone willing to build something new instead of settling for something safe. As they sat together in David's small apartment, making impossible plans for an impossible life, David realized that everything he'd thought he wanted had been too small. He'd been aiming for comfortable when he could have had extraordinary. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. They'd have to figure out how to blend two completely different worlds into one life. They'd have to deal with government paperwork for an alien resident, explain their relationship to David's family, and navigate the practical realities of an interspecies partnership. But tonight, they had love, hope, and the infinite possibility of tomorrow. It was more than enough. 6 months later, David stood in the kitchen of their new apartment, watching Kira teach a cooking class to 3 other human-alien couples via video call. The apartment was bigger than his old place, with wide windows that let in plenty of natural light and enough space for both human furniture and the few Kyathi items Kira had been able to bring from her world. Remember, the key is to feel the ingredients, not just measure them, Kira was saying to the screen, where David could see couples from around the world following along. Each planet's food has its own energy signature. David smiled as he listened to her explain concepts that would have sounded impossible to him just months ago. Now, watching her help other couples navigate the challenges of interspecies relationships felt as natural as breathing. The past 6 months had been the most challenging and rewarding of David's life. There had been paperwork mountains to climb, as they worked with the newly formed Department of Interspecies Relations. There had been awkward family dinners where David's parents tried to make conversation with their son's alien partner. There had been moments of frustration when cultural differences created misunderstandings that left them both feeling lost. But there had also been magic. David had learned that love wasn't just about finding someone compatible, it was about choosing to grow together, to become more than either person could be alone. Every day with Kira brought new discoveries, not just about her world, but about his own capacity for wonder, courage, and joy. "How did the interview go today?" Kira asked, finishing her call and joining him at the counter where he was sorting through mail. "Really well," David said, putting his arms around her waist. "The position at the Galactic Cultural Exchange Program sounds perfect. I'd be helping newly arrived aliens understand human society while helping humans prepare for contact with other species." "That's wonderful. You'd be so good at that job." "I had a pretty good teacher," David said, kissing her forehead. Among the mail was an official-looking envelope with the seal of the galactic community. Kira opened it carefully, her eyes scanning the contents. "What is it?" David asked, noticing her expression change. "It's from the Council," she said quietly. "They're offering me a position as Earth's official Kyathi cultural liaison." "That's amazing! That's what you've been hoping for!" "Yes, but..." Kira looked up at him with concerned eyes. "The position would require travel, a lot of travel. I'd be going to other worlds, attending conferences, spending weeks or sometimes months away from Earth." David felt his stomach tighten. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that 6 months ago, I would have said yes immediately. The chance to see other worlds, to learn about different species, to be part of something bigger than myself, it's everything I dreamed of when I first joined the partnership program. And now?" Kira set the letter down and turned to face him fully. "Now I'm thinking about how much I'd miss our morning coffee routine. How I'd worry about you forgetting to eat proper meals when you get busy with work. How I'd hate falling asleep without you next to me." David pulled her closer. "Kira, this is your dream job. You can't pass it up because of me." "It's not because of you," she said firmly. "It's because of us, because what we've built together matters more to me than any career opportunity. What if we could find a way to make both work?" "What do you mean?" David picked up the letter and read through it again. It says here that the position would involve training human liaisons to work with other species. What if some of that training happened on Earth? What if you could do part of the job remotely, and when you did have to travel, I could come with you sometimes? Kira's eyes lit up. You'd want to travel to other worlds? With you, I'd want to travel to other dimensions. David grinned. Besides, someone's going to need to document human reactions to alien environments. Might as well be me. David, do you realize what you're saying? Interplanetary travel isn't like taking a vacation. Some of these worlds have completely different atmospheres, different gravity, different everything. Sounds terrifying, David admitted. Also sounds like the adventure of a lifetime. That evening, they called Ryan to share the news. He appeared on their video screen from his own apartment, where David could see he was cooking dinner for himself and his new girlfriend, Lisa. So let me get this straight, Ryan said, stirring something in a pan. Kira gets offered the most important job in interspecies relations, and your response is to volunteer to become the first human space tourist? Something like that. David laughed. This is why you two are perfect for each other, Lisa called from off-screen. You're both completely crazy in exactly the same way. Says the woman who's dating someone whose best friend is married to an alien, Ryan pointed out. Life partner, Kira corrected automatically, though she was smiling. Speaking of which, Ryan said, have you two thought about making it official? Like, with rings and vows and all that human tradition stuff? David and Kira looked at each other. They had talked about marriage in the abstract, but the topic had never come up seriously. Kayathi don't have marriage exactly, Kira said slowly. We have bonding ceremonies, but they're very different from human weddings. What if we created something new, David suggested. Something that honored both traditions? A human Kayathi bonding ceremony? Why not? We've been making up the rules as we go along anyway. 3 weeks later, they stood in the same botanical garden where David had first introduced Kira to Ryan. It was a small ceremony. Just Ryan and Lisa, David's parents, a few colleagues from work, and 3 other human alien couples they had become friends with through the support group they attended. Kira wore a dress that seemed to be woven from starlight, something that shifted between silver and blue depending on how the light hit it. David wore a simple blue suit with a boutonniere made from a flower that only grew on Kira's home world, a gift from one of her former colleagues who had reached out to congratulate them. The ceremony itself was unlike anything any of them had seen before. They exchanged traditional human vows, promising to love and support each other through whatever came next. But they also performed a Kayathi bonding ritual where they shared a mental connection that allowed each to feel the other's emotions directly. I can feel how happy you are, Kira whispered, tears streaming down her face as the connection settled between them. I can feel how much you love me, David replied, amazed by the depth of emotion flowing from her to him. It's like music made of feelings. Ryan, who was serving as their officiant, cleared his throat. If you two are done having a telepathic moment, I believe there are still some traditional words we need to say. David and Kira laughed, still holding hands, still marveling at their new connection. By the power vested in me by the state of Washington and apparently the galactic community, Ryan said with a grin, I now pronounce you husband and wife, life partners, and co-adventurers in the craziest love story I've ever witnessed. The kiss that followed was witnessed not just by their friends and family, but by representatives from 6 different worlds who had come to see Earth's first official human-alien wedding. It was broadcast live to dozens of planets, where other couples in similar situations watched and felt hope for their own futures. Later, at the small reception in their apartment, David's mother pulled him aside. I have to admit, she said, when you first told us about Kira, I was worried. Not because she's different, but because I didn't know if you were ready for such a big change. And now? Now I can see that you didn't just find someone to love. You found someone who makes you braver, kinder, and more yourself than you've ever been. She smiled. That's what real love does. As the evening wound down and their guests began to leave, David and Kira stood together on their small balcony, looking up at the stars. "Any regrets?" David asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Only that it took the universe so long to bring us together," Kira said, leaning back against him. "What do you think comes next?" "Adventure," Kira said confidently. "Travel? To worlds we can't even imagine. Meeting species we've never heard of. Learning things that will change how we see everything." "Sounds perfect," David said, "as long as we're doing it together." Above them, the stars seemed to sparkle a little, brighter, as if the universe itself was celebrating their choice to build something new together. In the distance, they could see the lights of the newly constructed Interspecies Cultural Center, where tomorrow they would both begin their new jobs, helping other couples navigate the challenges and joys of love that cross the boundaries between worlds. David thought about the man he had been 6 months ago, lonely, stuck in routine, afraid to dream too big. That person felt like a stranger now. Love had transformed him, not into someone different, but into who he had always been meant to be. "I love you, Mrs. Chen," he said softly. "I love you too, Mr. Chen," Kira replied, and David could feel the truth of it through their bond, warm, and bright and infinite as the stars themselves. Their story was just beginning.